Okay, so welcome everyone to another exciting episode of the MoonShot Podcast, hosted by three luminaries. And what I'd like to do today is hand over to Robert, who will tell you a little bit about who he is, and then after that we'll kind of go in that direction because John is someone that Robert knows. So I'm gonna hand over to Robert. Robert, the stage is yours. Why don't you give our listeners a quick overview as to who you are?
I'm still discovering who I am, but I'll try and give you a description of who I am up until this point. I'm a spiritual being having a human experience in my body. And the experience has definitely varied and been super interesting. And John could attest to that as well. John is a good friend of mine who I've known for about 10 years in Miami. And he has been a witness and experienced some of the changes that I've gone through, some of the ways in which my consciousness has expanded. He's been witness to. And some of those experiences were really very poignant.
Hmm.
And whether or not we get into it tonight, it doesn't matter because this focus is really on John. Now, John is a resident of my.
Robert,
Yeah,
before we get to that, I just thought we'd introduce our other co-host, namely Josue, then me, and then we'll kind of get into the conversation with John. So,
perfect.
uh, yeah, Josue, do you want to like jump in, just give us a quick overview as to who you are, whether you're a spiritual being or whatever, just kind of let us know in your own words. Oh, you're on mute, Josue. You're on mute. If you can unmute, yeah.
Wow, where do I go with this when I'm just a spiritual being as well, having a physical experience? And it's a journey of discovery. That's how I look at it. And all of these interactions, these conversations, it's like opening up gateways of possibility. And I've been fortunate enough to meet a wonderful individual like Rajiv and Robert, who just add to that to reinforce that mindset or that journey that I'm on the right path, and I hope to continue to discover. And I feel that John is going to add even more to that experience of
Yes.
being and open up that consciousness. So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you for that, Josue. I'm just going to chime in very briefly. So, John, pleasure to meet you. Thank you, Robert, for inviting John onto the show. A small introduction. My name is Rajiv, also known as the Assassin. Why, you might say? Well, because I assassinate two things to make the world a better place. One, I assassinate scandal and negativity from Google, social, and the press. And on the flip side, we assassinate marketing mediocrity by elevating people from obscurity, by getting them to speak at the United Nations, amongst other things. So that's just a small little snapshot as to what I do. And with that, I'd like to hand the virtual baton back to you, Robert. And why don't you kind of maybe start the conversation with maybe hand over to John, because maybe John would
Yeah.
like to give some stuff.
Well, John, I want to welcome you to the podcast, and I have a really good feeling it's going to be illuminating for all of us. John, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, where you're living now, and a little bit about your life experience up to this point.
Well, I am a Cuban political refugee. My life started from leaving. My parents picked me up, took me from Cuba in 1959 when I was 5 years old. And so my journey started out pretty with a lot of hardship. So it was very difficult to leave everything behind, especially now I can look back for my parents because they came in the 50s and almost 40s for my mom. And it was pretty, so I can really say that my uh, life began really difficult because as you can imagine, having coming with nothing, there was no generation transfer of wealth because everything was lost to communism. And the only thing that I can say is there is nothing that I can that I have not experienced that I would not experience, because everything that I experienced has brought me to this point. Today, I can say my life is one of peace and one of joy, because I have had a complete shift in consciousness.
Oh, that's
So
amazing.
that's where I am today.
So, John, I gotta ask you, right? Because you said, Cuban immigrant, Miami. The first thing that comes to mind is Scarface, because Cuban, Miami,
Well,
late, like 60s,
growing up,
70s.
the only thing I could say, growing up and being a teenager in Miami and starting the dating, Miami was one hell of a party. Okay, that's all I can say.
There you go. There you go.
Okay, yeah.
And,
well,
yeah. Oh, and
yeah.
I wanted to kind of like ask Josue, because Josue, what John said kind of to a degree has a slight parallel with your story, right? So I think for John's benefit, maybe just kind of like share that little
Sure.
parallel just for his benefit.
There's that connection already, that the value added from that life experience, and one that I can relate to, having myself been an immigrant and leaving El Salvador during the 1980s as a result of civil war, and making kind of that trek to the United States with uncertainty, with hardly anything, and to be in this place that it is a dream come true. And this is where the reinforcement of, you could say, it's destiny, that is preordained destiny, but also having a vision, having the imagination to dream, to believe, and then to do the things to move in that direction. So I can relate to a lot of the things that John has said. What really caught my attention that you mentioned is that shift in consciousness, which I'd like to dive a little bit more, or have you explore and share with us, John, what that means to you, as to that process and how it occurred and what it is, so that we can benefit from it and our listeners as well.
Yeah,
Well,
Yeah.
John, before you say something, I just want to kind of segue slightly to Robert, because I kind of cut Robert mid-thought. And before you answer, I'd just like for Robert to complete his thought, and then maybe you can answer both of them
Yeah.
after that.
Well, actually, Josue, you read my mind, because the next question I was going to ask John was how he went from someone who was in the business world in a somewhat traditional role, how he became somebody who was seeking to expand his consciousness. Can you expand on that, John, please?
okay, so look, what Robert said at the beginning, I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. Everybody is, because everybody is a soul, because only God can create a soul. So our parents are the parents of the vehicle, not of the soul. They're the parents of the transient part of us, which is the body, the thinking, the mind, the emotions, and that ego, which is nothing more than our what we think that we are, that we identify with, because we are given a basket, and that basket is the name, and then we start to fill that basket with, I like this, I don't like this, I stand for this, I believe this, I don't believe that, ba 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 ba. And that is where when we get into our 30s, 40s, and 50s, it becomes very heavy, because something inside of us, which is the soul, is that which is going to walk out of the body when the body is ready to die, because everything in the material world that is born has to die, okay, including us. But this is the thing, we were not taught that way, okay? we were, I don't know, coming from El Salvador. I can believe that you were born in the Catholic religion, like sort of I was. Robert was born in the Jewish religion, and Robbie, you were probably born a Hindu.
No, I'm Christian, Protestant.
Oh, okay. But isn't that Ravi from India?
Rajiv, yeah, from the tiny village of Mumbai. Yes.
Oh, okay. So I don't know how in the hell you became a Christian in India
Well, my
because
entire family is Christian for the last
oh,
7 generations.
okay.
A
So
small percentage, we're a
that's
minority.
funny because
Yeah, I'm still a minority.
I love yoga, okay? Because a lot of the yogis have taught me how to connect internally with my soul, okay? And that is really when the shift of consciousness. My shift was at the time when I everything in my business, it was like a hectic, and I was running around and doing this and doing that, and I thought I was going to have a heart attack from all the stress. And then I decided to learn how to live from the within to the without. No
Interesting.
longer try to get anything in the outer world. Have it come from within, meaning have it come from my soul, meaning having God manifested, or Rama, or whatever you want to call God. Okay, that conscious self and energy that creates and maintains the
John,
universe.
John,
Okay,
I have a question. At what age did you have this either revelation or epiphany?
48.
Okay. So, and what were you doing prior to that age? Like, what was, I guess, your either spiritual experience or religious
Well, I
experience or...
always was a seeker.
Okay.
Okay, I always was a seeker, and my awakening, believe it or not, came from a person. I don't know if you heard Eckhart Tolle,
Okay. Name
the
sounds
author
vaguely
of The
familiar.
Power of Now.
Okay.
In the first chapter of The Power of Now, he has a line that he says, "To become the watcher of your thoughts." And I said inside myself, what the hell is this guy talking about? Then all of a sudden, it was an epiphany, an enlightenment. My spirit, my soul is going to watch John's thinking. And from that moment on, I started to become like a conscious, like a space between the vehicle and my thinking, my emotions of my body, and the true me, my soul. And it took me a long time, but I can tell you something today. I can quiet my mind in a blink of an eye. Today, I don't worry, because to me, worrying is keeping what you don't want in your outer reality. And so that is the shift from the mental, emotional thinking and ego to the shift of the soul and spirit, which is the direct connection to the creator, which I care to call God.
John, I love what you just said. I'm wondering if you could share the story that you shared with me about when you withdrew from the job that you had and when you were bringing water into your house. You know the story I'm talking about?
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Uh,
And that was part of your awakening. That was part of the process.
well, that was where how can I say, when I went from a third dimension to the fourth dimension in frequency and consciousness, and then went up to the fifth. Okay, and because at that point in time, Uh, with my wife, I owned a publishing company, and we were okay. And then one day, I sat her down. We sat down. We started about 9 a.m. in the morning, and we didn't finish until about 11 o'clock. If I would have told her that I was having an affair, it would have been easier and shorter. Okay. But I told her that I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't be in business anymore. And I definitely could not be in the publishing business and the business that we owned anymore, because we had just gone through a lawsuit. We won, but that lawsuit was like, it just took the business out of my soul. And so I did nothing for about a year and a half. The only thing that I did was read books, meditate, and I had people that used to work for me bring me food. I had people, and it wasn't that I could not borrow the money, but they cut my power, they cut my water, and I had a neighbor that would run a cable behind me, and we would have 3 fans, and then we would have a little refrigerator, one of those mini refrigerators running, and then the water. Another neighbor would give me a hose. I would take 5-gallon tubs, and then to flush the toilets in the morning. And I can tell you this, that my 2 children living with us and everything, they learned one big lesson from that true joy has to come from within. And you can have all the material wealth, all of the toys, the homes, the cars, the jewelry, the everything,
The
and you can
women.
be, and yeah, including women, and you can be miserable. Why? Because once you buy a car, once you buy a suit, once you wear it, once you drive it the second time, it's old. It's old. It's no longer, once that experience of obtaining it and trying it out. Oh yeah, maybe sometimes it will take you a couple of weeks or 3 weeks, but then it gets old. You want the next one. That is what the material world is. But once you connect with your soul, it's eternal. And there is such a peace, and there is such a serenity, and there is no need for anything external once you connect. That's why yoga is the connection of your being with God. And you can only do that by going inside.
So I have like a slightly different point of view on that. Like I said earlier, I'm Christian.
Uh-huh.
When I accepted Jesus in my heart, I experienced tremendous peace. Peace like I
Okay.
never witnessed, like experienced ever before in my life, and a sense of surety and certainty. And it's kind of like I experienced a level of protection such that I just felt almost untouchable, like a superhero. Like I had like powers and stuff. Like I could go anywhere and nothing would happen to me ever. And that's exactly how my life has happened. Nothing bad has happened to me ever. And I live in the Bronx, well, the nice part of the Bronx, but still the Bronx. And people, when you say the Bronx, they're like, oh my God, sketch neighborhood. Oh my God, what's going to happen? Is it okay? And I come home at night, like 3 a.m., 2 a.m., 4 a.m., and not once have I ever had to like look over my shoulder ever. Yes, granted that I'm a big guy, I'm 6'5". You probably can't tell by how I appear on Zoom, but I'm 6'5". Josue has met me in person, as has Robert. But the point is that, like I just feel like I'm totally cool. I feel a sense of protection, and then that, of course, is like, my experience, my life experience based on my relationship with Jesus and God. So, yeah, I get it. And I think the whole point of this discussion is to kind of explore, like the different paths that people have to kind of like getting to the point that they want to get to, right? I think that's great.
Well, I have also, I have, a lot of enlightened beings, including Jesus. Okay. I have, Babaji, Lahiri Masahaya. I have Pir Vialati Nayat Khan. I have a lot of people that I bring into my consciousness because this is the way that I look at Jesus, okay? I don't believe, okay, in my heart that Jesus came to remove our sins because no one can remove your sins because you're going to have to transcend anything that you have done to another soul, okay, in this life, in another life. It could be the next one or the next one or next one, because everything has to balance in the universe. So there is no punishing God. There is no sin. There is one, if you are, like in Kabbalah, it says tikkun, and it says, you will continue to get rebirths as long as you have a desire for your selfishness instead of the desire for sharing everything.
Okay.
Okay. So,
John, just a sec. So that's like a very interesting point. I think I'd like to sort of maybe get our other hosts to kind of weigh in on what they, their response, right? Because this is, after all, a conversation. So I'd like for, Josue and Robert to kind of chime in on, what they think about, rebirth, reincarnation. Like maybe Josue, let me start with you, since you kind of have like I said, a parallel path with John. Like the immigrant from crazy times, but now here you are doing like extremely well for yourself. So yeah, so Josue, I'm kind of looking at you in your direction and handing you the mic.
Thank you, Rajiv. Quite an interesting conversation. And at the center of all of this is God. That's kind of what I'm taking away. And it's like thinking of a great sphere or a big plate, and that's my dog in the background if you can hear him.
No, I can't actually.
Okay.
Zoom tech is awesome.
And every soul, whether it's from the smallest butterfly to the birds, all of that is interconnected. And when we're in a state of consciousness and awareness, the universe speaks to us. And it gives us different signs, but it speaks to us if we're consciously aware of it. And all of it is part of this great, whether it's a plate or a sphere, where it's timeless, boundless. And all of it feeds back into it. And this is where we become aware that we're all connected. And that when we set these values of less and more, it's really just an illusion. Because when you remove all of that, it's complete consciousness, all of it. And at the center of all of this is God, and just connecting to that source. And even though these energy flows may be going in every direction that we may say is a bad situation or a good situation, if we're anchored to that core, we can, whatever, it's like the ocean, whatever wave comes, whatever current flows, you're anchored, you're centered. And that's having that connection to God.
Awesome.
I agree. And you brought up a really good point. Think of the material world as the surface of the ocean that is always rough. Think of God as the bottom, the depth of the ocean that is always calm. So once you leave your mind, your thinking, your emotions, and you connect with your soul, you are there at the bottom of the ocean, wherever it could be a hurricane going in the outer world, but you're going to be at peace and joy. And nothing, no thing can exist out of the consciousness and the being and energy of God. So it's all God. You are God. You are not different than God, because there is only God expressing itself through the multiplicity of creation.
Okay, Robert, I kind of want to like pull you in here to kind of get your sort of like reaction slash comment on both what John just said as well as what he said earlier about rebirth and reincarnation. I'd love to kind of hear your point of view on that.
Well, it's funny what Josue said was leading me to the next question I was going to address to John, which is something that John and I have talked about a lot when we meet and we talk about these things. And that's the notion of oneness, how everything is connected. And once you start seeing things through the prism of that connectiveness, the whole world shifts in your consciousness. I think that is like a critical stage for moving on to another dimension of awareness, to understand how we're all related. So, in other words, look at it like this: all the wars throughout history, if people had a different consciousness at the time, they would realize that they're trying to kill themselves. If we're all connected and we're all one,
Right.
you would never want to hurt another human being or take advantage of them, because by the virtue of karma, which I think exists without question, you would be hurting yourself. And I believe that karma is the equalizing force in the universe, so that every action has an equal reaction to it. But when people express themselves and do things to other people, without a doubt, it's going to come back to them. And it's because most people today do not understand how we're all so connected. And if we could make any change and illuminate the fact how everything is really related to everything else, perhaps we would be, taking a giant step towards alleviating all kinds of hardship and suffering in the world, because it really stems from that lack of awareness that we're all connected. And John, you could speak more on the notion of oneness, because we always talk about this. And there's even a book called, I believe it's called Oneness, which you've recommended
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah. In fact, before John says what he's about to say, I just want to add like another kind of like idea which I'd love for John and maybe all of you to sort of react to. So again, I'm not like I don't like presume to say that I'm like an expert on any of this, but I'm kind of like parroting information that I've heard other people utter and say. So there's this one concept that, like the soul contract, like souls kind of have like a mission, and each lifetime is kind of like some sort of it's some sort of a thing that they have to go through in order to further develop, and they kind of almost like decide before they take that life that, okay, my life is going to be like this for XYZ reason, and then I'm going to live that life to sort of develop and meet some, per se unknown purpose. And so from that, I mean, there's this concept that all souls kind of like go through this kind of like thinking approach, and that's how kind of life is. So I guess I have like two questions for the group. Question number one is, well, first of all, what do you think about this idea? Is this something that you've heard? Agree? Yes, no? And then the second question is, assuming that there is some truth to this concept, and if all the souls in fact are going through their own like specific path, which could involve either suffering or pain or some sort of like revelation that they are going through to meet a specific goal, then I guess then everything has some sort of a purpose and things happen the way that they're supposed to happen because it was sort of preordained to a degree, right? So I'd love to kind of like hear what all of you think about that.
Hmm. Can I
Okay.
step in? Yeah, I was just going to say something that came to mind. I didn't mean to interrupt anybody, but when you say that, it seems to me that you are eliminating the concept of free will. And I think it's kind of a balance between perhaps a certain fate or nature and then the free will which we as human beings have to either go in that direction or not. I think it's kind of a combination. That would be my comment about that.
Well, you're right in a lot of points, Robert. But I think that when the soul goes up, and the Zen Buddhists say, the Book of the Dead, when they're reading it to the people that are about to die, It goes through 49 different stages before it comes back. Okay, so the thing about the balance of the universe, which the universe I call God, okay, because maintains and sustains everything. Just think about it that we have nothing to do with our body functions. We don't have anything to do with our breathing, with our circulation, digestion, etc. But then again, uh, it's done for us in perfect harmony. The same thing as the universe, the rotation of the planets, our solar system, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that is the gift for us to come to understand when the soul incarnates who and what we really are and our connection to that oneness, which is God. But once you connect to God, once you connect to that, you connecting with everybody. And once you get to that point, you will not do any harm to anybody else because you really, it's to the point of unconditional love, non-judging, because everybody is in exactly the place where they have to be and they should be. Because when the soul, before it comes down, it then starts to figure out what it is that it's going to achieve in the karma that they have to cleanse and what it is that they're going to learn to become one in this incarnation. So it's like a two-part thing. And every soul has to agree because nothing is imposed on any soul to do anything.
Exactly.
And that's where the free will comes in.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of like I think a little bit of like a five-dimensional kind of concept because on the one level, the soul obviously has decided that, you know what, I'm going to do this. And then obviously like it incarnates as like a human or, whatever that life form is, and then kind of goes through life. And in that life has, whatever choices it is offered to kind of make that choice, right? So
that's why you have the free will to not follow it.
Right. So and apparently, and again, I'm not an expert here, but apparently, like existence as a human is on Earth is perhaps like the most tough existence of them all. That's what I've heard. And it's like souls that go through this journey either repeatedly or once or twice or how many ever times that they do is because, they need like that extra school or whatever whether it's the school of or whatever you want to call it. Apparently, that's kind of like a must-have. It's like a way of like discovering like who they are, finding themselves. Like I think Robert or you, John, said earlier that it's kind of a rite of passage that they kind of have to go through this in order to kind of achieve some level of learning or development. So yeah, I mean it is like a kind of like a very interesting concept because if you think about it, yes, there is to a degree some level of freedom of choice as too far as what you do in your lifetime. But then the soul that determines that I'm gonna be a little kid born in Africa, in starvation, that choice that it makes to kind of take that life is just kind of like a hard thing for us to sort of almost intellectualize to wonder like, wait, what? Like, why? But obviously those some things are just not known.
Well, because maybe that soul that was born in Africa, and it's funny that you use that because I use that as an example. It could have been the Germans, okay, in the Nazi era, burning or gassing the Jews, okay, to death.
Yeah, exactly.
And so they have to come and transcend that. So they're born, so they die young. Maybe they're there 6 months of whatever, but they went through that, and that's a way of cleansing. And the other way of cleansing is and I think more it was when I did my transition and I stopped like trying to see the outer world as outside of me. And then I started to become more non-judgmental, more loving, because then I knew if I did somebody to someone else because of my oneness, I was doing it to myself. So then I stopped doing a lot of the behaviors and the thinking, because you don't necessarily have to say or do it physically, but even in the thinking, okay, there is that negative transmission of energy in thought.
John, could we talk a little more about the power of thoughts and beliefs in shaping our reality?
That's a
Okay.
good topic. I like it.
Yes, and I'm going to say this. There's a foundation, okay? Number one is who you think you are. If you believe that you're a human, you're going to be under the human third dimensional law. If you believe that you're a spiritual being having a human experience, that connects you with, in quantum physics, it says, the void. The place of total possibilities and probabilities. Okay? Second, your belief. A belief to the human is like an app downloaded to the phone. Okay? You download the app, it's operating in the background, and you don't remember until you delete it and say, this does not work for me anymore. But it's from the conscious to the subconscious. And you could have downloaded that app, okay, that belief, when you were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay? And then you're thinking, the third thing. How many of us have had verbal conversations with people that were not present in our minds? Arguments. Okay? For what? Okay? So thinking, also worrying, is probably thinking of something in the future that is not here, that there's nothing can do, or something that's happened that you don't want in your life. So that's what worrying is, keeping something you don't want in your reality. And then there is your words, your emotions, and your actions. But the foundation is who you think you are.
When you say that, John, could you sort of expand on that? Because most people, if they're asked who they think they are, they're not going to say they're a spiritual being having a human experience.
Okay. I think that the best way to put it is this. The human body is born and the human body dies. Okay? Now, what is that power, intelligence, energy that makes the human body function without us consciously doing any part of it?
And in fact, so what John said, I think it aligned really well to something that I said earlier about, the thing about like how I live in the Bronx and life is beautiful. And the funny thing is that, so like my expectation and my kind of experience of my everyday life is that life is beautiful. It's beautiful. I can't even hear a siren if I really even strain my ear. It's almost serene. Josue is laughing. But it really is nice and serene and peaceful. And someone else who lives maybe just one street over from me, for whatever reason, has like a completely radically different experience of the same place where I live than me, and is complaining to me about, oh my God, did you hear that? The thing about the fight that happened? Did you hear about that shooting that happened? Did you hear about the accident? I'm like, where is it? I want to see. I want to see. I've been actively seeking for the fights because I love fights, and I've been seeking for like chaos and like the crash because I love drama, right? I'm very drawn to it. But the point is that you might think that what is wrong with this guy, but I'm actually looking for all this because I kind of have like a very twisted sense of humor and I find it entertaining. but I never see it. The reason why I think I never see it is because my projection of reality is that life is beautiful, it's peaceful, everything is in harmony. That's why wherever I go, all I see is harmony. And that's what I experience on an every single day basis. I don't see fights, I don't see conflict, I don't see shooting. I don't, even if I want to see it, I still don't see it. Maybe it happens after I leave or something. I always miss it, always. And but I think it kind of ties to what you said, John, extremely well, because if you're thinking a certain way and having like a certain expectation, that's what your life is going to be. And that is, it's almost like, I think it kind of goes back to something someone said that, we're the architect, we're the creator, we're creating our world by our thoughts, and thoughts are very powerful. So, and kind of, I love what John said that, the brain is like a phone and you're downloading apps, because that's like a very beautiful illustration, because it kind of makes you think about programming and how you have programs running, in the background that you're not aware of. It could be
Absolutely.
stuff that you got
Absolutely.
your parents or whoever. Yeah.
Right. Rajiv, let me jump in here because, we're almost out of time. We have a few more minutes. John, for our listeners and for ourselves, could you give us some steps that people could actually use to enhance their consciousness, to actually get to this place that we've been talking about throughout the last 40 minutes or so? Things that our listeners could do to help them move in the direction of this kind of oneness, consciousness, godness, whatever you want to call it.
Well, I go back into what the yogis, the sadhus, the babas of India, the Dalai Lama, the Zen Buddhist, and all of these, Christ also meditated, okay? And he's an enlightened being, which I have a lot of connection to him, is quieting your mind, quieting your body. That's why meditation is. You sit down and you don't have to get yourself in the lotus position, just a straight back. And the easiest way to get there is concentrate on your breathing, the in breath and the out breath. If thoughts come, let them go. Don't get into the thread of the thought. Allow it to pass. See it like a movie, and continue to get back into your breath until you can do a minute, until you can do 3 minutes, until you can do 5 minutes, until you can do 30 minutes, an hour, and 2 hours, and 3 hours. Okay. And that is the best way to become conscious of what God is, because Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is within.
That's perfect. John, if any of our listeners want to get in touch with you, what would be the best way to do so?
johngallo.im@gmail.com.
Perfect. Gentlemen, do we have any further questions for John? We're kind of nearing the end of our broadcast. Anything come to mind before we sign off?
Thank you, John, for sharing these nuggets of wisdom and the experiences you've had through your journey, and helping us to expand our own consciousness and awareness. Where oftentimes we're drawn in by the material world, which is right in front of our eyes, that can be deceitful or deceive us of the true essence that we have as spiritual beings, that everything is already within, and turning inward to create even more so the things we see in the material world, in the physical world. And when we do see them, we just recognize that I'm a creator.
Right. And let me just add something to that thought, which I think is incredibly profound and true. And to also realize that whatever we create in the material world is ultimately an illusion.
Yeah, it's all Maya.
We're all laughing. I love it.
Yeah.
Are we out of time?
It's been a pleasure meeting you all. Thank you for having me, and it's been really nice.
Yeah, it was a
Pleasure.
pleasure meeting you, John.
Yeah. So glad you were able to join us today, John.
You
Thank
got
you.
it.
Thank you.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Until
Take
next
care.
time.
Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Right.